So, hi everyone, and welcome to this discussion. My name is Amrita Chaudhary, and I would be moderating today's discussion. So, yes, and Swati and Shraddhanjali would be managing the chat for today. Just to give you the reason why this event is actually supported by ISOC Delhi. And to begin, I wanted to give a brief introduction to what CCAOI is. Those who don't know, we are a trust. We engage in capacity building, research, and advocacy, mostly in India. And it is related to internet and digital policies. And for over nearly 2 decades, we've been organizing such capacity building initiatives, webinars, conferences, and conducting research on issues related to internet and governance and digital policies. And so, since the 20-year review of the World Summit on the Information Society is currently ongoing, we and CCOI thought that it is important that stakeholders, even in India, understand what this process is and engage and even share their inputs with our government as well as in other wherever it is possible where non-governmental stakeholders can submit comments. So this is an introductory discussion on this topic, and we plan to have more such discussions when the element paper or zero document happens. And Sorina, just so that you know, Manthan actually means churning of ideas, and that's why the term Manthan has been used. And today we have a distinguished panel of speakers. We have Sorina Teleanu from Diplo Foundation, Gitanjali Shah from ITU, Anita Gurmurthy from IT for Change, Anirban Sharma from Observer Research Foundation, Sunil Abraham from Meta. We would be having Avinash Agarwal, who is the DDG International Relationship in Ministry of Communication. And most probably, Sushil Pal, Joint Secretary of METI, would be joining. And we will have a community intervention from Dr. Devesh Tyagi, who is the CEO of NIXI and the chair of India Internet Governance. This agenda would be shared in the chat by my colleagues. And this is an interactive session, so you are encouraged to share your views or queries in the chat. And during the open house, you can raise your hand and ask questions or feel free to share your comments. And some of the questions that you speakers may also revert in the chat. Do mention your name and affiliation while speaking. And while we want it to be interactive, but we would be requesting you to be mindful and respectful and courteous about each other's views. You may differ in views, but we would not like to have abusive language or personal attacks in this discussion. It's a safe space. And since we have a tight schedule and Gitanjali has to leave, so we would be asking her to share more about the WSIS+20 high-level forum and what ITU is doing. Of course, this is part of the entire WSIS architecture, which Sorina would be speaking about after that. So, Gitanjali, you have 7 minutes. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Amrita, and it's so nice to see old friends Sunil, Arniban, of course, Anita. So nice to see you all after such a long time. So I'll be very quick because I'm pretty sure my colleague Sorina will also touch upon some of the WSIS+20 process related aspects. So just very quick, the principles of the WSIS process. It's a UN process. We work with more than 47 UN agencies. It's been digital cooperation framework in action. It's people centered, not only just advancing technology but empowering people. We have had this multi-stakeholderism at the heart of the WSIS process. Very quickly, the evolution starting in 1998 in a Minneapolis Plenipotentiary Conference of the ITU, when Tunisia requested that there should be a framework like WSIS, to its review in 2015, and now its review in 2025. It's often quoted nowadays that WSIS is something old, and the GDC is a new thing, and often people working in this space will acknowledge that the framework of the WSIS action lines have evolved to set pace with technology. With the so with the evolution in technology, our action lines have also been evolving. We have been having discussions on AI, on meta, and so many on space issues in the WSIS forum at the IGF. So the framework of the action lines have provided us with really the scope to discuss all issues in the gamut of information and communication technologies. So these action lines, they cover all aspects, and the beauty of the action lines is that we work with different UN agencies within their mandate to implement them. For example, e-health is WHO, e-employment is ILO, e-environment is UNEP, ICT infrastructure is ITU. So it's really a beautiful framework of the UN in action, and we have a very great collaboration there. So I briefly mentioned this, but just mentioning the milestones again: the Geneva phase where we adopted the Geneva Plan of Action, the Tunis phase where IGF was born out of, Amrita. WSIS plus 10 is 2015. We had the 20 years of WSIS, and now we're looking at 10 years of WSIS. Now we're looking at the 20 years. So really the implementation wheel, we call this, the WSIS Forum, stock taking, the United Nations Group on Information Society. So we have been working together to implement the WSIS through these various follow-up processes. I said WSIS is multi-stakeholder in nature, right from the youth to women and girls to the UN Secretary General so we have been working with all stakeholders, the technical community, private sector, academia, and all. So just to mention also ITU's mandate, ITU membership takes WSIS very seriously. Right from the Geneva Plan of Action to the Tunis Commitment, we have a ITU 140 plenipotentiary resolution, we have 2 council resolutions, we have sector resolutions from each sector, from BDT, TSB, BR, and our council working group on WSIS and SDG. So just I put this slide in here just to show you how important it is for ITU's 194 member states. So ITU also had a call for inputs. We received 97 submissions, and these submissions are being analyzed, and they will be put into the WSIS website very soon. So, what have we achieved? We do have some targets that were showcased in the WSIS outcome document, but many of them we don't have data for. For example, how many hospitals are connected? We are working with WHO, but we don't really have the data for that. So, 5.5 billion people connected. Through GIGA projects, we can see how many schools are connected. UNESCO had done a study that 400 plus languages are fully accessible online. So we have very basic data. We don't have the whole overview on the action line, the targets. So one of the things that we were hoping that the WSIS plus 20 review could achieve is to have targets and indicators for each action line, which we don't have right now. We have generic targets. ITU has been maintaining a stock-taking database where we have more than 2.2 million stakeholders. It's a great repository of projects within the WSIS action line implementation. And I mentioned UNGIS. So very quickly, we have 31 members, UN agencies, and 16 observers. These are all appointed by the Chief Executive Board. And once the GDC was adopted, we, as UN, mapped the existing, work and activities within the WSIS framework that is already, kind of implementing the objectives of the GDC. So this mapping is available, and you can find it on the website to explore how GDC and WSIS are already aligned. So the WSIS Forum, I won't take much time. Our chair designate is the Minister of South Africa. 49 ministers and deputies are confirmed until now. This is from the 7th to 11th of July. 37 head of regulatory bodies are confirmed. This really shows the interests of not only the G77 but also EU in WSIS. We are encouraged by these figures, and we do hope that you will be there with us for the high level event. So, also, Amrita, you had asked me to cover a bit on what is it in there for India. So, of course, for this is very important for India. Looking at the uh, 2.6 billion offline people that live in rural areas. So we should continue to have this framework of digital cooperation that reaches the last mile. Of course, capacity building and digital skills under action line C4 is very important part. So skills India, there are lots of initiatives in India that focus on digital skills. So it continues to be a priority of the WSIS process. The multi-stakeholder model continues to be a priority of the WSIS process beyond 2025. India had hosted the IGF 1 year, and I was part of it. It was a great example of the multi-stakeholderism that is, and I think Sunil, we met there for the first time in the IGF. Also, the ethical dimension, very important with new technology coming up. We also have to make sure that the ethical dimension is looked at. We have an action line on ethics. It's really important that countries take ownership of the WSIS process, and together we look at the vision of WSIS beyond 2025. Over to you, Amrita. Thank you so much for accommodating my time.
Thank you so much, Gitanjali, for stepping in and joining within your schedule. Thanks a lot for this presentation. And with this, we will move to Sorina, who will, actually take us back through the entire WSIS structure, though Gitanjali has shared an overview. But Sorina, over to you. And I think you have screen sharing rights.
Thank you, Amrita. Indeed, let me see if I can share my screen. And meanwhile, hello to everyone. I'm glad to be joining you from Geneva, pretty much like Gitanjali, I guess. So yeah, I will be repeating some of the things that were just mentioned, but also trying to go a bit more in depth into some of them, like what are the action lines, what exactly WSIS was about, and then leave a few questions for you to perhaps reflect on as you start discussing the relevance for India. So going back in time, Gitanjali already mentioned that it all started in 1998 when ITU at the plenipotentiary meeting actually proposed the idea of holding a World Summit on the Information Society, and this was later endorsed by the General Assembly in 2021. So WSIS actually stands for the World Summit on the Information Society. For those of you here who might not be very familiar with our terminology in this space, I'll try to use less acronyms, but also please feel free to stop me at any point and I can try to provide more clarifications. So the idea was to look a bit in very general terms at what can be done at an international level to ensure that information and communication technologies can be used for development and everyone can actually benefit from them. And that was at the core of the World Summit on the Information Society. It was a UN summit in the classical sense, in the sense that at the end of the day, it was member states making decisions, but it also had this very strong multi-stakeholder nature. And the participation of various actors, private sector, civil society, and others is something that evolved a bit throughout the process. And also when we talk about WSIS, the World Summit on the Information Society, we talk about these two phases because it was a bit of a long summit, not something we're very used to these days. So there was this first phase in Geneva in 2003, then some meetings for the next 2 years, and the second phase in Tunis in 2005. Out of these two phases, we had 4 key documents, which you're seeing on the screen. These days, we talk a bit more about 2 of them, and these are the Geneva Plan of Action and the Tunis Agenda for the Information Society. What you're seeing on the screen is probably the quote I like the most from all of these outcome documents, and it is repeated here and there across all 4 documents. And if you read it carefully, and if you basically just replace information and communication society with the terms we're using these days, like digital technologies and digital society, it's pretty much still what we want to achieve these days with a more inclusive digital space, more people having access to technologies, ensuring all of this then is based on the Charter of the United Nations and in line with the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. So again, although these are documents that were adopted some 20 years ago, as Gitanjali was also saying, they are still pretty much extremely relevant, also because they have this very technologically neutral approach to how it was written. It was very carefully written. Again, it was a long process for quite a few years. And most of, well, actually all of the provisions there are still pretty much relevant today whenever we talk about digital technologies, digital society, digital economy, and whatnot. Action lines were mentioned earlier. These are basically recommendations in some sense for member states and other actors as to what they can do in practice to ensure that we can have a more inclusive information society. Again, that was the terminology used back then. So there are 11 action lines with details across many, many issues from information, communication infrastructure to access to information and knowledge, capacity building, confidence and security in the use of ICT, even ethical issues. And here I'd just like to stop for a moment because we sometimes say that, yeah, again, WSIS was something that happened 20 years ago, and the documents don't really talk about, for instance, artificial intelligence. And that's true. They don't talk about artificial intelligence as a term as such because, well, it's not something that was pretty much discussed back then. But if you look, for instance, carefully at this section line 10, which is about the ethical dimension of the information society, it deals with pretty much many of the issues that we're discussing today in the context of AI governance, again, around ethics and human agencies, human agency, and all these issues that we still want to preserve when we talk about the use, development, and deployment of artificial intelligence. So again, just highlighting again that these action lines, recommendations for things to be put in place are still pretty much relevant, even in the context of somehow newer technologies that have evolved over the years. As Gitanjali was also saying, for all of these action lines, we have UN agencies who are acting as facilitators or co-facilitators, or they're in some way supporting the implementation of these action lines and also doing some work on their own. You have them all on the screen, and all of this information is available kind of all over the place online, so you can find more details if you want to look more carefully into this. What you see on the screen is an attempt to put on one slide the various elements that emerged out of WSIS, again, 2003, 2005. We mentioned the action lines. Another key discussion point during WSIS was around internet governance. The term itself was actually defined during WSIS. There was a working group created after the first phase, and they came up with a definition. But just to take us a step back as to why internet governance actually made it to the agenda or on the agenda of WSIS, there was this controversy back then. The internet just started being more and more used around the world. And as you know, it was not something that governments had much of an involvement with. It was basically something developed by the private sector and the technical community, and governments were kind of catching up along the way. So in the context of WSIS, there were these discussions around two main issues. First of all, what exactly do we mean by the governance of the internet? Are we only discussing about core critical technical elements of the internet like domain name system and internet protocol numbers? Or are we talking more broadly about the impact of the internet across economy, society, human rights, and whatnot? So what exactly is the governance of the internet and which issues are being discussed there? And the second controversy was around who's doing what when it comes to internet governance, and should governments be having more of a stronger role? Because of these controversies, a working group was created to try to come up with some sort of solutions as to how to deal with these issues. And then in the second phase of WSIS, we had the Tunis agenda, which came with the definition of internet governance in a broader sense, so not only technical resources, but also the economic, social, human rights, and whatnot implications of the internet. And also with the creation of the Internet Governance Forum, IGF, which is this annual multi-stakeholder platform for discussions on everything and anything related to the internet and also other related technologies. where everyone just comes together and exchanges experiences and tries to see what's going on in this field. This is convened annually by the Secretary General of the United Nations. And the forum itself has evolved quite a lot over the years. Happy to discuss more about the IGF later on if you want. Another thing that was left kind of in the balance in WSIS was this notion of enhanced cooperation. And I know it might sound a bit complex and complicated, but I wanted to raise it here because it relates to the role of governments in the whole internet governance discussions. The idea back then was to create a process that would then enable governments to perform their roles and responsibilities in relation to international public policy issues related to the internet. And this thing keeps coming up in every annual resolution of the UN General Assembly. So it's something many governments still care about, and it will come up over and over again in these discussions. And it might also be raised in the context of the review. And speaking of the review, so the documents in 2005 also called on UN member states to look at the implementation of WSIS outcomes 10 years later. And this is what happened in 2010. The UN General Assembly came together in December at a high-level meeting and adopted what is now called the WSIS+10 outcome document, again, looking at the extent to which WSIS action lines were implemented and also how some of the mechanisms have evolved over the years. And there are some quotes here on the screen, but I'm going to just skip through that. And when this WSIS+10 outcome document was adopted in 2010, member states of the UN also decided that they want to do this exercise again 10 years later. So we're now talking about the WSIS+20 review, which is basically, again, looking back into 20 years of implementation of WSIS and seeing what has happened. What I wanted to highlight here, and you're seeing also on the screen, is that WSIS itself in 2003 and 2005 actually set the foundation for many of the elements that form what we call today's global digital governance architecture. Sorry. And from there on, we had other mechanisms and processes evolving, and then we started discussing also about digital cooperation and digital governance, and then we had also last year the adoption of the Global Digital Compact, which was mentioned earlier, so the GDC, which kind of brings some sort of renewed political commitment to the idea that member states do want to create a more inclusive digital society right now and to deal with some of the challenges that still remain around digital divides, safety and security, human rights, and whatnot. But to some extent, the Global Digital Compact itself complements the WSIS and its outcomes from 2003 and 2005. And ideally, we look at them as two complementary processes, mechanisms, documents, whatever you want to call them. So WSIS+20, there's already an ongoing process. For instance, a couple of weeks ago, there was a meeting here in Geneva at the Commission on Science and Technology for Development, coming up with some sort of recommendations for New York. The whole process is being co-facilitated from New York by Kenya and Albania, and the secretariat is being provided by the UN Department of Economic and Social Affairs. What's happening, there will be a draft outcome document pretty much along the lines of the one that was adopted in 2010, probably. And member states will then have to negotiate on that document, and in December, at a high-level meeting at the General Assembly in New York, basically agree on it. So what would be some of the agenda items that will have to be discussed in the context of this review and then reflected to some extent or another in the outcome document? As I was saying, the extent to which we have managed to implement the WSIS action lines around this whole idea of creating a more inclusive information society, which is, safe and secure and respects human rights and all the issues mentioned in the 11 action lines. And also probably more than what we have managed to achieve, maybe what we have not managed to achieve and what are the areas where progress is still needed, and ideally also how we get there. Then probably also some reflections around some of the mechanisms that were created in 2003, 2005 around the Internet Governance Forum, the notion of enhanced cooperation, the whole idea of Internet governance. So we'll see how that is being played out. the interplay between WSIS and the Agenda 2030. So how are we leveraging digital technologies for sustainable development, and how our processes at the UN level around WSIS and around the Agenda 2030 working with each other to some extent. And then similarly here, this interplay between WSIS outcome implementations and follow-up, and implementation and follow-up of the global digital compact, ideally creating a bit more streamlined interlinkages between these two, so we don't end up with two separate processes, for instance, at the General Assembly level when we look into review. So that's basically it. I put on the screen a few questions that you might want to explore as you discuss the relevance of WSIS for India and Indian stakeholders. Like, how has the vision of WSIS progressed in India? What kind of gaps are still there? What WSIS action lines are more relevant at the national level? What challenges are being faced there, and how can global cooperation mechanism better address them if there is a role for global cooperation mechanism there? What concrete steps can be taken to actually ensure that interests from a national level are reflected in the overall review process as it happens in New York? What kind of expectations do you have from this process? And also as it moves forward, again, with this interplays with other things happening at the General Assembly level. So just to wrap up, it might sound like, a lot of complex language that people who follow UN know, but for everyone else, it's a bit like, okay, why do we care about this? So I'm just trying to highlight here a few things why I think WSIS+20 is important for basically everyone, not just people like us who follow these processes carefully. Remember, WSIS outlined this vision for an inclusive information society, and it has all these action lines there. So WSIS+20 is a very good opportunity to reflect critically at the extent to which we have achieved this vision. And again, if you don't want to talk about information society because it's a term that, it's not fancy anymore, think about the digital society. Where are we with actually creating that as an inclusive digital society for everyone? And then it's also a good opportunity to look at how to create a more efficient and effective global digital governance ecosystem or architecture or whatever you want to call it, because we talk about efficiencies, we talk about limited financial resources at the UN level, we talk about potential duplication of efforts, we also talk about governments and other stakeholders who have limited capacities to follow everything and anything going on at the global level. So in some sense, this process is also a good opportunity to see if we can bring a bit more effectiveness and efficiency in the whole process and see if we can streamline some of them so it actually serves the purpose at the end of the day. And it also provides a bit more opportunities for stakeholders with more limited capacities to be able to engage. And then how you can contribute. There are obviously ways to contribute directly, especially if you are a government, in this case, the government of India, and there will be various documents being issued by colleagues in New York, including this non-paper that should come out somewhere in June, I think, outlining some key elements that might be reflected in the outcome document. And then based on this, we will have various drafts of the outcome document, a resolution that the UN General Assembly will be developing. If you're not a governmental representative, ideally, you do use various mechanisms and platforms in place at the national level to help shape the position that the Indian government will be taking officially in these negotiations. And multi-stakeholderism was a keyword in WSIS in 2003 and 2005, and ideally keeps remaining as we discuss this review. So although it is a negotiating process in New York among member states, there should be input from other stakeholders as well. You have a link here to the official page of the WSIS+20 overall review at the General Assembly, again maintained by the Department of Economic and Social Affairs. And at Diplo, we're also trying to keep track of the process in a bit more detailed way, so you can find all sorts of background information here on this page, including an AI agent, because, well, we talk so much about artificial intelligence. These days, we've developed an AI assistant that you can just go and ask various questions about WSIS, its implementation, its follow-up, the review, and whatever else. So you'll get the link here. And I'm going to stop here. I think I went a bit beyond 10 minutes, but I hope this has been useful and happy to answer any questions you might have. Thank you.
Thank you, Sorina, as in that was an excellent presentation to give a quick recap to people, because we do want people to engage and not many in India are actually engaging, and hopefully this would be helpful. We would be circulating the link also. So thanks a lot, and you've raised a lot of important questions, which perhaps we, if not all today, we will try to dwell on it. And with that, we will move to the section wherein we have the non-governmental stakeholders, Anita, Anirban, and Sunil, who would be sharing a brief overview on two questions which I had shared, and they have 4 minutes each for the questions. And I'll start with Anita first, and then Anirban and Sunil. And while coming back in the next round, we'll go vice versa. The first question to all the three of you is, what do you feel were the outcomes of the WSIS over the years, as in things which worked and didn't work from your end, and why should we from India engage in this process? So Anita, over to you first.
Thank you very much. It's hard to follow Sorina, but the debate, I think, is extremely important, and it's 20 years since the WSIS, but we can be sure it's going to be a debate for the next 100 years. I think the arc of technology has moved, and therefore, obviously, with technology, there are always positive outcomes. But the social outcomes of digital technologies always depend on the contextual factors and conditions where we find the technology interacting with society. This is true for everything, all kinds of technologies, and digital technologies are no exception. I will, as a civil society representative, reflect on the fact of what the WSIS really dreamt about, and why in certain ways those, not just the normative aspects and ethical aspects of the information society as it was called then, but also the pathways that were laid down in the form of commitments. What do we actually see now that we need to critically take stock and look for a solution? So broadly, I do think that the information society as we have it now is driven by large corporations. This is something that's a reality. And governance arrangements of the digital order have really not kept pace with ideas of equity and justice. So constantly we encounter questions around power. And of course, more increasingly, I would say, of planetary boundaries. What is the paradigm doing to natural resources and the climate question? The connectivity and digital divide question is still very open, and it has somewhat transmutated into questions of new divides, infrastructural divides, innovation divides. I would also like to point that we should look at the digital paradigm as another definition of the existing socio-economic paradigm. So the digital is not just coming into an economic paradigm, but the economic, social, and digital are co-constituting each other. To that extent, I do think there are very, very significant questions we face today and are going to face in the coming years, which is about existing intellectual property regimes, for instance, the questions of data and data-based intelligence, and of course, what we may call the network data complex, which has created a crisis for citizen rights, right? There is a deep crisis, and even well-meaning states have been unable to provide for the rights of citizens and marginalized communities that are adequate to the current paradigm. So having said that, I'd like to see why we need to reclaim and recenter the directions that we have set for ourselves from the WSIS text. So the text is really quite a guidance, I would say. So we, towards the end of the Geneva Declaration, is a paragraph that talks about why we need to move towards an information society for all based on shared knowledge. And this is still an incomplete project. And so that is, I think, enough reason why we still need to endeavor, right? And I would say that from these last paragraphs of the Geneva Declaration, we should claim ideas of an inclusive information society that requires what the text says are new forms of solidarity, right? Partnership, cooperation among governments and stakeholders, which means we really need brave, bold, and contemporary solutions. Old solutions really will not work. We really need renewed commitment because it's about the one planet that we care about. It's about
the global society that we all are, we all belong in and that we care about. And therefore, this particular thing called the public domain or the people's domain, which is also referenced very well in the WSIS text, and the Geneva Declaration refers to the rich public domain as an essential element for the growth of the information society. We need to reclaim it from the excessive control by private forces. And a couple of things I'd like to say about the Geneva Declaration are that the entire idea of fusing the SDGs that Sorina spoke about and the WSIS, that particular process is still incomplete. And with the pandemic, many countries have unfortunately regressed on these, right? Poverty or hunger or universal primary education or empowerment of women. And therefore, I would say this is not just work in progress, but how technology can really further a society where all of this it moves from inequality to emancipation is something that is very, very important. The text of the Geneva Declaration affirms commitment to Article 29 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and talks about duties that we all hold, not only the rights we have, but the duties we hold. And I think that's really important when we talk about a society where truth is under grave threat, because the freedoms of some, of troll armies, of misogynistic folks, of opportunistic businesses, this has become the destiny of unfreedom for the majority. And I think that is something we really need to keep in mind. We need to rededicate ourselves, the WSIS text underscores, we need to rededicate ourselves to upholding the principle of sovereign equality of all states. This is at the center, and I think here is where we've often spoken of the third way or the fourth way that India is able to offer, and it's not really glib. I think the people of India have the power to offer many, many imaginaries where we unfortunately have key influencers and powerful figures who have subverted these imaginations and the real potential of democratic innovation. We are forced to believe that innovation is what the technology companies define innovation as. But we have to pause a little bit and understand that even AI is normal technology. It's normal because there is society and there's technology, and there's a relationship between society and technology. This is nothing new that civilizations need to grapple with. And finally, I'd really like to say that the Geneva Declaration did not imagine the AI revolution in the manner in which it has unfolded. But what is really important to note is that it does point to the fact that the benefits of technology are unevenly distributed. And that is, I think, very important. This is why we need to engage to reclaim the principles of the WSIS. And I'd like to say a very important thing, that we need to claim not just the principles of a knowledge and information society, but we need to know that that's possible only when such a society is grounded in truth, solidarity, and emancipation. These are values that the Indian Constitution enshrines very much and very centrally: sovereignty, socialism, secularism, democracy, and justice. And we really need to be guided by this. What I wanted to ask you, Amrita, is should I take the question around the priorities right away or wait for other speakers to finish the first round and then come back to the second round?
Anita, Amrita has been logged out because of the electricity cut. So I think we can take the questions later, and I think we can move on to the next speaker.
It's not about the questions. It's the second question that was part of what I needed to answer. So it's a second round. Yeah.
Anita, my understanding is we go twice.
We go twice. Thank you, Sunil. Thank you for that guidance.
That is what I understood from what she said.
Perfect. I'm happy to pause here. Thank you very much.
I think then we can move on to Sunil, and you can start with the answer, and then we move on to Anirban.
Okay. Thanks so much, Shraddhanjali. I'm sorry, I also have an electricity issue, so if I suddenly disappear, my apologies for that. I wanted to sort of pick off from where Anita left, and she talked about the arc of technology. So I want to make a statement that perhaps the arc of technology increasingly is bending towards openness. So here I'm misquoting another more popular phrase. I was in Tunis, and at that time I was an employee of the UN. I then returned to civil society where I came from, and now I find myself wearing a private sector hat, representing three stakeholder communities across the 20 years. But my obsession is exactly the same. In Tunis, I was obsessed with open source and open standards. And I continue to be obsessed with both those issues. Fortunately, I work for a employer, Meta, who's a big champion of both open source and open standards. But I wanted to reflect on the Tunis Agenda document and also the Global Digital Compact from the perspective of action lines C1 and C3, ICT for D, and access to information and knowledge. And I want to draw this comparison that the Global Digital Compact has additional forms of openness in it. For example, it has mention of open content, open data, and open AI models. So many more types of opennesses in the Global Digital Compact document. If you open the Tunis Agenda, you will notice that when the word or the phrase open source is used, it is sort of hedged with a mention of proprietary as well. And then I opened the report on the 20 years of progress and I searched for the term proprietary and it doesn't exist. So I think, again, to the point I was making, that the arc is clearly moving towards openness. And again, building off Anita's point about what India could bring to the global table, especially in terms of the third way or the Delhi effect on global internet governance. I think the best example is digital public infrastructure. And perhaps that is a national level exemplar of the multi-stakeholder model. Not with all stakeholders at equal footing, but each stakeholder in their in their respective roles and responsibilities. I think just like standard setting bodies like IETF and W3C serve as gold standards for the multi-stakeholder model, in India, DPIs do serve as a national exemplar of the gold standard. And of course, congratulations to METI and the Ministry of External Affairs and all the other stakeholders in India that were part of the campaign to introduce DPIs into the global documents, global governance documents, including the GDC. And I love the way the language is shaped in that document. It talks about DPGs being a building block of DPIs, and as folks know, especially those with an economics background, open source, open standard, open content, open data, even open access scholarship. Meta publishes a lot of research under open access licenses. All of this forms broadly the digital public goods that undergird and enable digital public infrastructure in India and also increasingly in the 20 countries across the globe. So I think tremendous progress has been made. Those of us following things closely may be disappointed with the nature of progress. But if you zoom out and look at this from a question of centuries, the possibility of having 100 exabytes of data, which is the publicly available internet, what Anita also referred to as the public domain, compressed into a 3 GB or a 1 GB file, and then, or perhaps even in the future, 256 MB file, and having the ability of serving that knowledge completely offline, using a cheap device like a mobile phone or a laptop, in villages and other unconnected parts of the country. It's a tremendous revolution that has been made possible thanks to openness. So very excited about the progress, and I think WSIS and the IGF the WSIS processes should take credit for accountability, and the IGF should take credit for being a forum for policy dissemination and the adoption of best practices. So thanks for this opportunity. Back to you, Amrita.
Thank you, Sunil. And we'll go to Anirban. And while there are some questions coming into the chat, perhaps in the next round, the speakers may want to address them when you speak. Anirban, over to you. From ORF, you've been looking at it from different perspectives. So how, your response to this question of mine?
Yeah, thank you so much, Amrita. And I hope you can hear me. I'm just keeping my camera off because the internet tends to get a little patchy each time I put my video on. All right, so I'm just putting the camera off.
Okay, no worries.
All right. Now, the first part of your question was about our perspectives on the outcomes of WSIS over the years. And really, I think the biggest outcome and the biggest achievement is its evolution as a multi-stakeholder forum, where ideas are shared, where knowledge is shared, and where ICT for development progress can be tracked. So it really has become one of the definitive platforms for that, and that is its biggest outcome. And, there have been 5 key moments along the way. The first, of course, was the Geneva Declaration of Principles and the plan of action that went with it in 2003. We've spoken about that already. But, the big achievement there was this emphasis on equitable access to ICTs for sustainable development. And in many ways, the Geneva Declaration was an early articulation of ideas that would later become institutionalized in things like the SDGs, the SDG framework, and also certain national programs like our Digital India mission. All right, the plan of action, the Geneva Plan of Action, laid a great deal of emphasis on connecting villages, for example. It talked about connectivity in non-urban areas. And in many ways, that has shaped programs like our, the National Optical Fiber Network, which began a few years later, and then later, of course, our BharatNet broadband program, right? So, many of these things are reflected in country-level initiatives which India has taken up. The next one, of course, was the Tunis Agenda of 2005, and which really gave birth to the Internet Governance Forum, and there was absolutely a need for a decentralized, open dialogue mechanism about Internet governance. The WSIS+10 review was important because, quite apart from reviewing a decade of achievements, it also showed the WSIS's openness to take on new evolving themes. Now, it may not have got to AI yet, but in 2015, it did talk about cybersecurity. It talked about the risks of surveillance. These were emerging themes, right? And it also, very importantly, linked WSIS outcomes to the 2030 agenda, which was then in the planning and came into effect the next year, right? You've also had the evolution of the open consultation processes, which has really been a way for countries to put their views forward. And very importantly, the WSIS action lines, okay, the SDG matrix, which a number of us have talked about. And this actually complements activities. So when we start mapping ICT activities onto these SDG outcomes, once again, it complements certain national activities like the ongoing voluntary national review that's happening in India. The VNRs are the Niti Aayog's way of sort of trying to check voluntarily on progress that has been made on the SDGs, right? So that and now we are into the WSIS+20, where we are going to look at things like AI, data governance, DPI, digital identity, and priorities for the next decade. Now, why must India engage? The WSIS is obviously a very important platform, and I'll actually begin with the point that Sunil raised about DPI. Now, the WSIS could actually become a very important platform for showcasing and promoting India's DPI model, which has been really very, very successful nationally. And as you know, there's been a lot of traction globally as well. And the WSIS could actually become a forum where we continue to build partnerships around DPI and conduct DPI diplomacy, so to speak. This is something India did very successfully during its year as a G20 president, and this is yet another avenue to take that work forward. Talking of our G20 presidency, another thing that India did during that year was sort of emerge as a strong voice for the Global South through the two global, the Voice for the Global South summits that we did. And again, that is a role that India can continue to play using the WSIS platform to ensure that digital development isn't driven purely by global North priorities. Other countries, emerging economies, developing countries like us actually have a strong voice too. The matter of AI is important, and a number of us mentioned it. So whether or not, the WSIS documents formally talk about AI, it is really the hottest topic in technology at the moment, right? And India does need to play an important role in shaping norms on data and AI governance. And now that we have our DPDP Act in place, we're actually much better placed to talk about data protection regimes now than we were earlier. And of course, it's important that India continues to be a part of conversations on AI norms and ethics. And this is really very important at a time when, in countries like the United States, for example, we see a strong focus on AI innovation, which can almost be unchecked at times. There is an overturning of executive orders that privilege safety, ethics, etc. Right? So it's voices like India's a more pragmatic approach that really needs to be foregrounded. And finally, of course, connectivity in the sense of telecom networks. This really has been an important focus of WSIS from its very inception. And given India's work in the 6G space, India is actually conducting a lot of R&D when it comes to 6G networks. India is really well placed to contribute to ideas and conversations about the future of telecom and connectivity, and we really are emerging as a key player here. So I'll build on some of these points a little further when we have our next round of questions, but I'll stop here for now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anirban. You've raised a lot of points out here. So we will be reversing the sequence, as in I was thinking you'll go first, but I'll actually ask Sunil to come first, then perhaps Anita, and then you can come in. While all of the three of you have, spoken a bit about what should be the things which should be looked, but, in the 20-year review, from your perspective, what do you think should be the top 3 or 4 priorities for, we could suggest to the government, as in, of course, we'll come up with a report, but we would like to make some suggestions, etc. And there were a few questions in the chat. I'll just tell in case you would want to address any of them is, while it is good to articulate risks, what are the worst outcomes from WSIS +20 which could come, and how do we avoid it? Shashank had raised that the internet governance is moving towards a multilateral model from a multi-stakeholder one. How do we claim the space for academia, civil society, and I would say the other non-governmental actors? And Aniket is asking that as we approach post-quantum era, how is the WSIS +20 addressing the urgent need for global cryptographic resilience, especially for digital vulnerable nations that may lack the resources to transition to quantum safe infrastructure? So I think it's more on technology, new technology coming. In case any one of you, while speaking, wants to even touch on this, it's up to you. So Sunil first, then Anita, and then Anirban.
Thanks, Amrita. I think answering the second question is a challenge, because if you look at any of the variety of documents that have been produced over the 20 years of the WSIS process, these are almost encyclopedic documents and they cover everything. So my suggestions are going to be focused on an area where I think India has a great need, and Meta could make a great contribution, not just in India, but also globally. To Shashank's point on the tendency for the multi-stakeholder model to shrink and for multilateral approaches to governance to grow, all I would say is, I don't think the embrace of multi-stakeholderism eliminated the role for states completely, but I think what it does is perhaps channel what Lina Khan said about AI governance. And what she said was that there is no AI exception to the laws on the books. And broadly, the way I see that is, if there is a regulatory vacuum, and it is clear and it is unsolvable through various multi-stakeholder approaches, then perhaps the states should act, and perhaps states should come together and produce treaties, whether it is at the level of the World Intellectual Property Organization, one treaty that would do a lot of good, both in terms of access to knowledge and protecting innovation, is to have a treaty on text and data mining exception at WIPO. So there is definitely a role for governments, and that role, as Shashank is worrying could go in both directions, but it has gone in good directions in the past. And India, whether it is the COVID patent waiver or the green tech patent waiver, India is at the very top of the access to knowledge, multi-stakeholder and multilateral dialogue. But what would be priorities for me? Number one is the disabled. I think more and more we need to focus, even though some progress has been made, not enough progress has been made to protect the rights of the disabled in information and digital societies. Here, Meta has two projects that I'll quickly reflect on. One is the React Native project, an open source library to build mobile applications accessible by default. You need to break it intentionally if you don't want to support access by the disabled. So that is one. And then the second is Meta Ray-Ban. That is a very powerful technology, especially when it comes to use by disabled persons. The second is languages, and Indic languages in particular, since we are focusing on India. Again, the self-supervised paradigm in machine learning has made it so that a Lithuanian speaker could make a small language model for a Santali speaker. That is how the global commons is coming together in a very, very powerful way. So you don't really have to be a technologist from a particular language community. Technologists across language community can support each other. And whether it is Sarvam or whether it is Chandamama Kadalu, which has been created by Swecha, lot of incredible small language model innovation happening in the country, and METI is also supporting indigenous model development, and bravo to METI for doing that. Meta has some work in this space, including No Language Left Behind 200 and Seamless for MT, which is able to recognize more than 4,000 languages. Finally, this business of the unused compute at the edge. Anirban has talked about telecom and other pieces that we absolutely need to get in place as soon as possible, whether it is 6G or fiber backhaul. But my first use of 386 in 1993, I remember using the device to its full potential. And my assessment is that if you were to look at all the smartphones in India, none of them are really being used at max potential. And that's where having large language models, small language models on the edge, serving users without putting any load on the network, providing a fully digitally sovereign experience, 100% privacy, nobody knows what you're asking your model. That is the vision of the future that India particularly should embrace, which is computing on the edge and making sure that all that unused compute potential is fully utilized, especially in the service of access to knowledge. Thanks, Amrita. Back to you.
Thank you so much, Sunil. And Anita, would you like to go next?
Yeah, thank you very much. Just restarting my camera. Yeah. Yeah, a lot has been said, and I think a lot to comment on. I think India must prioritize the WSIS, both because international normative standards and agreements are really vital, and to have a voice there, has been the legacy that India has had, and Sunil has given some excellent examples from debates on intellectual property, particularly exceptions, and the way in which India has taken the moral lead, so to speak, on behalf of the Global South. And there is more than adequate opportunity and potential, as I will submit, in this domain. But I think there is something very vital and curious that we should remember, that by 2050, 15% of young people in the world will be in India, that is under 18. So we also have like an axe to grind, right? What is the kind of AI universe that we will build? Will we all condemn posterity, the future generations, to a kind of information society, data society, knowledge society, innovation paradigm, where young people are pretty much, the global south, somewhat enslaved to agenda for innovation set elsewhere. That's a very important question. So India has to then think a little bit more about its own ideas of what is that kind of economic democracy it needs to build. Who should be driving this economic democracy, right? And therefore, I would really say that some of us in the global digital justice movement have been thinking about digital non-alignment. And here again, India is no stranger. We really co-led this idea a few decades ago, in which for a just international economic order, we don't want to really necessarily follow X country or Y country. We are quite happy, being on our own, so to speak, which doesn't mean disengaging. It means engaging on our terms. So there is a very big difference. So I'd really like to talk about the imperative to safeguard the human rights of future generations. And just going back to Sorina's presentation and others, we are not only talking about the Global Digital Compact, but if we really look at the Summit of the Future, there's also to the annex to the summit's declaration, the Declaration on the Rights of Future Generations. And I think that we do really need to read all of these things together. And I'd like to therefore point to a few very, very important agenda items where I think India must step up. It has the legitimacy and credibility to do so. It has the insights of the bureaucracy, the permanent missions that are there in the critical spaces. It has collective memory, historical memory to claim, some of the things that we've been doing. And, I have a wish list of 7 different things, but I think it's worthwhile articulating them. And of course, as civil society organizations, we are very, very ready to support India on this path. Before I begin all these, I'd really like to also respond somewhere to Sunil's musings on how we need to connect the idea of openness to the public domain. And therefore, open and public must go together because, openness should really be managed in a manner, I think, as you did mention, the whole realm of the knowledge commons, as you pointed out, shouldn't be subject to degradation, shouldn't be subject to fiefdoms, shouldn't be subject to free riding, foul dealing, and all the rest that often goes with openness in the digital domain. The digital domain is somewhat exceptional in that when you open something up, unless you really have the prowess of infrastructure, you're not able to make good the benefits of the openness. So I think that's a note of caution that we shouldn't speak about openness as if it stands alone, but we should speak about openness as if it's linked to public control, public accountability, public value, and the rest of it, right? So with this in mind, I'd like to talk to 7 very important agenda, that is for the Indian people, and certainly extremely well represented by, people who have represented the Indian state in these negotiations. One is a just and equitable data governance regime. I'm part of the UN's working group on data governance, and I do see that some countries are allergic to the word equity. They're allergic to it. They recoil from it. When it's mentioned, they want it cut out. So this is something India has to comfortably sit and say, well, equity is about the future generations. It's about the 55% of young people who will be from Africa and India by 2050. It's about really the right of the last person standing. It's about the poor woman that we want One Connection to reach. It's that woman who should be exploiting edge computing to realize her empowerment. And of course, it's about a cognizance of nature, right? It's not about big data centers alone. So we really need to look at placing a data governance regime that's centrally equitable and inclusive, and we should raise our voice as a country, as a nation, in leading the many others who will join us undoubtedly against a small group of nations who are against equity. Yesterday, there was this exchange, and a lot of scholars from the
I'm
US.
so sorry. Would you just say the points because we are running a bit late? Sorry.
Okay, sure. So I will conclude in 1 to 2 minutes. I'll try to take less time. So the second is, I think, thinking about the digital economy and improved taxation structures. Somebody, I think Dhruv had raised the question about financing and about the single most important issue that would make the entire thing collapse. And I think that we should, in the WSIS+20, really look at financing. And that is really not looking at philanthropy or largesse, but we should actually be looking at raising, what Afrodad and so many others, Oxfam, have been talking about, which is really taxing the wealthy. And the digital services tax that many countries, including ours, whatever, there are different names for this. That's really important because we need financing, we need infrastructural sovereignty. We do need to really look at public digital infrastructures as a vital glue that has already been mentioned by the speakers. But we should also understand that public goods have to be governed well and accountably. And then we should also normalize AI. AI is no exception. And AI needs to really be regulated well. And it's not only the ideas of responsible AI, but ideas where, as Sunil pointed out, we do need certain treaties and maybe the mandates for those discussions. The Secretary General has already called for a decade of data. So we should be actually debating this to move towards governing the present of AI. Finally, I just want to point to an international economic regime that serves the interests of developing countries, including India and our future generations. We should oppose digital trade rules that prevent nation states from enforcing and implementing transparency and accountability over our algorithms. So talking about the need for a connection between the WSIS order and the international economic order is really important. Call it IP, call it trade, call it international taxation. It can be competition rules, anything. And therefore, I would also like to borrow from, and this is my last point, Amrita, I'd like to borrow from wonderful contributions that come from the climate change debates, precautionary principle, common but differentiated responsibilities, polluter pays. All of these that we are very, very familiar with be embedded in debates on data and tech. And I hope really the WSIS is able to lift off from, imaginaries that have largely come from very powerful actors to the imaginaries of the people. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Anita. I know there is a lot to say, but we are running a bit late and I was just...
No, I understand. Thank you, Amrita. No problem at all.
15 to 20 minutes more because we would want the question answer session also. Anirban, over to you.
Yes, thank you so much, Amrita. And I'll also keep it a little short in the interest of time. Your question now is, what should our priorities be at the WSIS, right? And I'm going to talk a little about what India's priorities could be, really. And so, I see three priorities which I'd like to expand on a bit. The first is, of course, DPI. I'll talk a little more about that. The second is a balanced approach to AI development. And the third is the 6G issue. Okay. Now, DPI is rather rare because it's one of those rather exceptional technological innovations that have flowed out of the global south and have begun to make an impact and an impression in the global north. It's arguably the first sort of technological innovation to have done that historically, right? And you now have a situation where the EU is looking to make some of its DPIs interoperable with India's. You have the US, which is keen to partner with India and provide DPI leadership globally, as in use it as a plank for development in third countries and so on, right? So this is rare, and we should take full advantage of that. And we already have a very strong foundation to be working with DPI. As you know, 20 countries are now partnering with India through its MOSIP platform to develop their national digital identity systems. The UPI is now available in more than 7 countries. During our G20 year, we actually entered into MOU with 8 more developing countries, and they have access to parts of India stack and are building their ID systems. And there are lots of other countries, in Africa, in South America, which are also in talks with India about developing digital payment systems and so on. So of course, the WSIS provides us an excellent platform to advocate for the benefits, the advantages of DPI, how it works, how they can be developed. But we also need to go to the next level of issues. Questions around the economic sustainability of DPIs. How do we explore how DPI can be privately provisioned? So the private provisioning of public infrastructure is something we need to look at more and more, and the WSIS is a good platform for that. And finally, a lot is said about how DPIs support innovation and help create a level playing field. But there are also moments when it can create new incumbents, and it could foreclose competition. So these are some of the thorny issues that we also need to look at with partner countries at platforms like the WSIS. Now, Sorina mentioned Action Line 10, which deals with ethics, and that, of course, has a bearing on AI development. And in the world today, we see two sets of dichotomies. You have centers of innovation like the US, and their innovation can get a little dangerous at times. And then you have centers of regulation like the EU. Then you have another set of poles. You have AI leaders in the global north, and then you have AI adopters and markets in the global south. Now, India is quite clear in its views that it really wants to try and find a middle path between these four different ideas. And we want innovation to flourish clearly, but not at the cost of ethics, safety, responsibility, and innovation. And this is why India is laying a lot of emphasis on building a trusted AI ecosystem, and a lot of our policy documents and government reports reflect that view. So, this is an idea. The present is a good time to actually share some of these ideas with the rest of the world through the WSIS platform. And there are also increasingly, a lot of conversations where AI is being connected with DPI. And really, if you look at the sheer volume of data that can be generated through DPI, that is excellent fodder for AI training models of the future. But how can that be done securely? How can that be done with data being protected? Those are questions we have to address, right? And finally, and this is really my concluding point, to take about 15 seconds for this, no more. 6G. A rather vocal battle has already broken out between China and the US. There's a race for 6G supremacy on, and the US often found itself a little reactive and a bit of a laggard when it came to 5G. So it's keen not to repeat some of those mistakes. And China is really leading a lot of cutting-edge experiments in the 6G field. But away from the glare of these great power rivalries, India is quietly making very, very strong inroads into the 6G R&D space. All right, and the guiding principles behind our 6G vision document, which is our big roadmap for 6G, is affordability, sustainability, and ubiquity. And affordability and sustainability really are messages that we always have to share with the global south, right? So again, this is an approach that will find a lot of takers, and India is in a good position to engage in discussions on this. And a lot of other things we're doing, the high-end R&D, the launch of a 6G test bed, which accelerates 6G innovation, capacity building, adoption, and also these alliances to co-develop standards. We cannot go at these things alone. All right, we need partner countries, we need partner companies, and we need to develop the next generation of standards together. And again, the WSIS is a good site where some of these conversations can be initiated. So thank you.
Thank you so much for this, Anirban. And with this, we will move to the next section. And we do have Avinash ji from Ministry of Communication patiently waiting to share what, from the government's perspective, what do you think are the priorities? Sushil ji was supposed to join, but I don't think he's joined in yet. But thank you, Avinash ji, for patiently waiting all this while, listening to everyone. So we'll go to you first to hear from your department's perspective. How are you looking at the WSIS+20 review? And you've been hearing a lot of discussions. The other esteemed speakers have been sharing your views. And I would also ask the question, because at the end of the day, this is a multilateral process when the negotiations happen, and our permanent representative in New York would be voting for the country. How, as we, the non-governmental stakeholders, how can we give inputs to the government? Because if we have some way in which, of course, we'll make a report, we will submit. CCG is also planning to do something in that. But how could there be a way in which we can have some dialogue, share at least some points from us, which could be considered by the government also when nuanced decisions are taken? Over to you, Avinash ji.
Thank you very much. First of all, thanks for inviting me here. And while I will be talking on behalf of Ministry of Communications as the ITU focal point. But I can see Sushil Parji is there, so maybe he would be talking more about what might he would like to add to that. Uh, First of all, like I would like to say that WSIS is a very important forum, and as India aspires to become a leader in emerging technologies, it is very important to remain engaged with such high impact forums. So that is, of course, there is no choice that we cannot or we should not engage with them. That is very important. And if we see the WSIS action lines, some of them map directly with what ITU has been doing and with what India has been engaging with ITU in the past. So if you see from C1 to C6, they are directly mapped with ITU. And then if we think of Internet of Things, then the lot of applications in e-health, e-agriculture and all those. So again, directly connect with the other things in C7. And someone mentioned about ethics also. So all those things are like very much related and related to us. So just to give a background of what was our view in the last meeting in the WSIS High Level 2024, the Indian delegation in fact mentioned about technologies to be accessible and affordable for developing countries to bridge the sustainability gap. They also highlighted that while AI holds immense potential to revolutionize digital governance, but it is also essential to address ethical, privacy, and inclusive challenges to fully realize the benefits of AI in governance. So this is something was flagged by our team last time. Uh, the esteemed speakers before me have already raised lots of pertinent points. So I am thinking like whether I should repeat or I should not repeat the same things, but I would uh, try to talk about something which we can raise, which where we are strong. But before that, I would just like to highlight that what if at a very high level, why we should engage. One is that like India not only should be present, but also should try to drive the agenda when we are talking of policy or governance at the global level. And this is definitely one of those forums. Second is that we ourselves have lots of strengths. We are doing lot of things. DPI and other things were mentioned by almost all the previous speakers, but there are other things that I would try to cover very briefly. So this is a good forum where we can share the work done by us, and it could be kind of like advertisement of our work. At the same time, it also provides an opportunity to learn from others the best practices they are following, and so mutually, like we can work and grow together. It is also important to flag certain areas where we need the priorities, where we think that technology should be there to bridge the digital divide, to be equitable. Like it should not create more barriers if the agenda is being driven by a few countries. So, like all those things. So, it is very important to participate and lead actions. Uh, I will briefly mention about something like which our ministry is directly concerned with. So, most important is the connectivity which provides enablement to the citizens. So, if we talk of 5G, which is now a huge coverage, like I think it is more than 95% coverage of 5G, which enables the citizens because you have access to technology, you have access to websites, portal data, all those things. Second is the optical fiber network being rolled out through digital Bharat Nidhi. Earlier we used to call it USOF, now it is Digital Bharat Nidhi. So this is a very important scheme, like because it was not very commercially viable. Government is funding the project, and optical fiber is being extended to all gram panchayats and now to villages also, which is in fact known to many. But there are other projects which perhaps might not be known to many, are that like our government is also funding for setting up 4G 5G towers in inaccessible or remote, or like sometimes like where some law and order issues are there. So all those are being extended. So these are very important infrastructure projects which ultimately lead to the information society. So these are some things which we should project at the global level, and we should also see that these are acknowledged or are reflected in the work. Sometimes some indices are developed, so these things could be part of those indices also. We have talked about DPI. I will not talk on that, but I will like to talk on some other aspects. Uh, I will try to keep it brief because I think we have shortage of time. But when we talk of AI, let us think of AI in critical digital infrastructure. Like we can talk of telecom, maybe we can talk of electric grid. So these are the critical infrastructures. And if AI is vulnerable, if AI is having some kind of uh, I'm not just talking about cyber attacks, but other kinds of flaws, maybe due to data sets or the model or whatever it is. So, all these are very important aspects which require uh, not just governance mechanisms, but also standards and other things. So, in our ministry, like MIT, we'll definitely be talking about more about that. But in DOT, we have Telecom Engineering Center, and we have already developed one standard for assessing and rating AI systems for fairness. Another one for assessing and rating AI systems for robustness is almost under finalization. And then we have done a lot of work on AI incident reporting, which is also a very important and crucial area, because if some AI incident happens, there should be a loop where it is reported, some feedback is there, and the products are improved so that the future incidents do not take place. And all these things, and we had a discussion with ITU also on how to take it at a global level so that some standards and implementation can be done. Then, just to give a few examples, like we all might have seen those. If you are using Airtel SIM, you get a call. Before that, you get a message that this could be a spam and other things. So this is just a use of AI. So you are like using AI real time to flag a call. Maybe it is not 100% accurate today, but maybe its accuracy will improve with time. Other operators are also doing. I've just named one of them, but this is one area where we are enabling citizens or like warning them of some frauds. We might not be using AI, but we are using data when we talk of spoofed calls, CLI blocking. So this is a big initiative by our ministry, like which we call as not DPI, but a telecom equivalent of telecom DPI. Like these are all digital applications. So what used to happen was lots of calls originating for fraud call centers situated outside the country, but using Indian calling line identification, so that causing frauds. So now we are able to identify which one is a genuine caller from outside and which one could be a potential fraudster, and then we block those calls. Another is like we use data to track lost handsets, all those things. So these are something, and we have discussed with a lot of countries, and lot of interest is there. So when we talk of DPI, we can perhaps also talk of these initiatives which India has taken and which could be added as a next layer of DPI. Uh, uh, One more thing that I would like to tell is that while Anandabanji to cover my point, speaking point on 6G, he already mentioned about affordability, sustainability, ubiquity, which I wanted to flag. But anyway, I would like to add that India was the one who persistently followed for adding ubiquitous connectivity as one of this 6G. So ubiquitous connectivity is very important. And another thing is that while we are talking of ethics in AI, we should also see that the enabling technologies like the 5G will be there. The Internet of Things is going to be there. We are going to have wearable device. We already have wearable devices. When we talk of e-agriculture, again, IoT is there. So the ethics and the privacy concerns and all those are not just related to AI, but all emerging technology also. Like if my data is being used, and it could be sometimes like some national security issue, like if someone can just take the IoT data from e-agriculture and some rival country can use it for some wrong purposes also. So like all those things are important where we can think of uh, using the WSIS platform to leverage it. Maybe I will pause here because otherwise it will become a long intervention. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. You've shared a lot of practical examples where we are using very innovatively. We'll have a Q&A so the audience may have some questions, but I'll move to Sushilji now. Thank you, sir, for joining. I know you were called for an urgent meeting, but thank you for joining. We'd like to hear from you, sir, your views on what should be our priority. How can we as non-government actors engage in the process? We aren't able to hear you. I think there's an audio issue.
Mute it. Is that okay? Thank you, Mrita. Let me, apologize for joining the session late, which gives me the advantage of, maybe repeating something what has already been said, but doubles your party of hearing, what you already heard. But then, Mrita, Miss Sorina Telau, the Director of Knowledge, Diplo, Avinash, the DDG from Telecom, my colleague from Telecom, Ms. Gitanjali Shah, Ms. Anita Gurmurthy, and Mr. Aniban Sharma, Mr. Sunil Abraham, and maybe other folks, which in case I've missed anybody else's name. Thank you for giving me this opportunity for sharing as to what could be India's priority for this WSIS+20 review process. As you all know, it's the standard intersection of the rapid digital transformation and urgent development imperatives. This review presents a very timely opportunity for all of us to assess what has worked, what has not, what are the gaps, and how we can collaboratively, shape a more inclusive and a resilient digital future. Therefore, the theme of today's is stakeholder discussion on the WSIS+20 review, and what it means for India is both very timely and important. And let me congratulate Amrita for organizing this discussion. As one of the largest digital economies and a steadfast supporter of the inclusive digital development, India believes that WSIS+20 review presents, as I said, it's a very timely opportunity to reorient the global ICT and internet governance strategies towards greater equity, more resilience, and collaboration. From my side, I think we see roughly about 5 or 6 priorities which we would like to focus on. First of all, the first to begin with is broadening the horizon of internet governance. Over the past decade, since the adoption of the TUNIS agenda, the scope of what we now consider governance in the digital realm has expanded significantly. What began primarily as a discussion around the domain names, IP addresses, and internet connectivity has evolved into a much broader conversation on the digital governance. With the advent of AI, as was being spoken earlier, I think this governance process has become far more complicated and far more multidimensional. The proliferation of social media platforms, video streaming digital payment services, such as India's UPI, and the growing influence of the emerging technologies like AI, blockchain, and the coming up the quantum, they have profoundly reshaped how societies work, we live, and govern. These developments have introduced complex regulatory, ethical, and sovereignty-related considerations that extend beyond the technical layers of the internet. Therefore, I think WSIS+20 review process must acknowledge the shift and recalibrate its framework to address these multidimensional challenges, ensuring that the governance of the internet is not purely regarding the technical part of it, but largely it focuses in the larger area of digital governance and AI governance, which is more responsive, future-ready, and aligned with the developmental aspirations of the country. The second one would be the multi-stakeholderism. India has always been strongly supportive, and we reiterate the support of multi-stakeholder approach in all aspects of the internet governance, except on the issues of the national security, where the sovereign interests are paramount. The upcoming WSIS+20 review process, where the future mandate of the IGF will be decided, that presents a critical opportunity to reaffirm this multi-stakeholder model. This has been further recognized by the Global Digital Compact that the internet governance must continue as a global and a multi-stakeholder, and must continue to be a global and a multi-stakeholder in nature. Also, the continuation of multi-stakeholderism has also been further reaffirmed by the recently by the UN General Assembly resolutions on the ICT on sustainable development. Therefore, this national initiative of India Internet Governance Forum, and the creation of special interest group, which we have recently done a few months back on the domain names, numbers, internet protocols, and the standards. And the future of internet further underscores our commitment towards a multi-stakeholder approach toward the internet governance process. The third would be the Internet Governance Forum as such, as to what it should be, in what shape it should be, and how strong institution this can actually emerge as. The key outcome of the WSIS was the establishment of the Internet Governance Forum, mandated by the US agenda in 2005. With this mandate further renewed in 2010 and again in 15. The WSIS+20 review will now reevaluate the IGF role beyond 2025. GDC has also acknowledged that the IGF as a primary multi-stakeholder platform for discussing internet governance issues, and also highlighted the need to make it further more effective and accountable, and so that it can actually come out with more actionable outcomes out of its discussions. While the IGF has been instrumental in fostering open and inclusive dialogue, stakeholders increasingly call for more concrete and actionable outputs that can directly influence the decisions at the national and the international levels. To enhance IGF impact, it is essential to improve its working methods by introducing a clear follow-up mechanism, a more focused thematic areas, and actionable recommendations that can feed into the decision-making in the ICANN or other relevant bodies. Further, therefore, when India's approach has been that we look forward for further extending and strengthening the IGF mandate beyond 2025 with a more action-oriented approach. And other thing, the funding of the IGF is equally relevant. We have all strongly advocated for the funding of the IGF by the UN. In the current scenario, there's a strong requirement to secure more funding for this group in case it has to come out with more tangible outcomes which can actually contribute to the internet governance process. And we have sent that response in different versions of our feedback for the GDC as well as for the other UN negotiations. Therefore, a more predictable UN funding would reduce IGF over-reliance on the voluntary and the private contributions, thereby reinforcing its neutrality and the legitimacy as a global platform for the internet governance. And therefore, we believe that there should be a continuity of the leadership panel in the IGF, and we recognize that leadership panel has the potential to enhance the visibility, the strategic coherence, and a policy relevance in the IGF discussions, particularly in the advancing the global south perspectives. And therefore, we are completely supportive of strengthening this leadership panel that can further facilitate actionable linkages between the IGF outputs and the intergovernmental decision-making forums, while still preserving the multi-stakeholder spirit of the IGF. The fourth point would be how can we prevent the fragmentation of the internet governance landscape? So this has been a key concern that must be acknowledged as we chart our future course of action on along with the digital cooperation. We are seeing that we have been witnessing the growing digital fragmentation in the internet governance space, the proliferation of our new bodies and initiatives, such as the Office of Digital and Emerging Technologies and a parallel process like Global Digital Compact. There are clearly many overlaps between the mandates. Therefore, often it's very confusing and perplexing for the developing countries as to in which forum they should be taking which agendas. Therefore, this institutional proliferation may contribute to a more fragmented digital governance landscape, making it difficult for the stakeholders to navigate through and influence the process effectively. Therefore, from India's perspective, it is imperative that the clarity and complementarity must be clearly established among the various institutions that are being created so as to avoid duplication and ensure a cohesive approach to shaping a digital future. The fifth would be the multilingualism and promoting the universal acceptance for greater access and inclusive information society. As the digital world continues to expand, overcoming linguistic barriers and enabling seamless access to the online resource in the native language are essential to bridging the digital divide and empowering marginalized communities. Therefore, despite significant progresses, there are significant challenges, such as a lot of them are technical limitations, but apart from such as the lack of awareness and consistent adoption of the IDNs and the email address internationalizations. Many websites and digital services are not yet UA ready, which further limit the access for billions who rely on the non-Latin script. India has been at the forefront of promoting this multilingual internet through the initiative like BhashaNet portal. I would not like to kind of go into the details of the various actions we have taken for the universal acceptance and the multilingual internet. India, I think we also consider that the UA is a core enabler for the digital inclusion, and we see multilingualism as essential to achieving the goals of Viksit Bharat. We therefore actively promote the adoption of domain names in Indian scripts and advocate the joint international efforts for promoting UA readiness and the language diversity on the internet. The last would be the contributions made by the DPI in actually bridging the digital divide in the financial inclusion. I think what I could gather from last couple of minutes before I joined that a few speakers have already spoken about it, so I won't kind of get into it. But yes, I mean, further acknowledge that, further reiterate that this has been further acknowledged during the Riyadh message in the IGF 2024, which have emphasized that the role of DP to address the need of historically marginalized group, including those with disabilities. E-government services should be proactive and provide an interface that seek to accommodate those of all abilities. They have underlined as to how the DPI can actually play a significant role in ensuring the financial inclusion. So these are largely the priorities from our side. And maybe we look forward for a more consolidated feedback from Amrita, after this discussion is done, so that we have a more coherent and a united front when we put up our agenda before the WSIS+20 review process. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. As in, yes, our team will be making a report, and once the element paper next month hopefully will come out, we will also share inputs and we'll have some more discussions. And, it's very heartening for us that at least the two departments have taken out time to hear all the stakeholders. With that, I will bring in the chair of India Internet Governance Forum, Dr. Devesh Tyagi. Deveshji, if you could share a few words on, when India IGF has also been mentioned, would you like to share a few words on it?
Yeah. Thank you, Amrita. Esteemed speakers, distinguished participants, at NIXI, we are dedicated to develop national capacity in internet governance by engaging and empowering youth on both technical and policy matters. So this year, we had started Internet Governance Internship Scheme, which also is used for the capacity building across the country. And we had engaged around 20 youths to work on the various problem statement across the IGF. So one of our participants, Rupam, is conducting a study focused on reviewing the WSIS action lines. Each study is aimed to assess the relevance and impact, which identified what has been effective and will highlight areas where the new strategies may be required. I also encourage all the final students which we are reaching out and recent graduate to apply, because we had also floated the next cohort under the internet scheme, and we are looking for 20 more youth across the country. And the last date for application under particular internship scheme is 25th of May 2025. So as in chair IIGF, we had conducted 3 sessions already, and we had got various problem statements which we are taking up with the various stakeholders. So I would like to happy to take part in WSIS conversations, and would like to contribute in future dialogues as well. And as and when the drafts are released, we'll also go through them and provide our inputs. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Deveshji, for sharing a bit the last moment about what India IGF is doing and what NIXI is doing. And yes, we'll keep everyone involved in the next discussions. etc. We'll now open it for open discussions. I do see Angela in the room from ICANN, and ICANN has been working a bit on the WSIS+20, etc. So, Angela, may I just call you out to share a bit about his perspective on it? And and by the time we'll request if others who are interested can raise their hands. Angela, over to you.
Thank you, Anurita. I hope everybody can hear me clearly. So, hi all. My name is Angela Wibawa, and I am a Director of Government and IGO Engagement for the Asia Pacific region from ICANN. So, first of all, I congratulate CCAOI and the ISOC Delhi chapter for organizing this timely event. So the internet is at a crossroad. The choice we make at WSIS+20 will determine whether it remains a unified, open, interoperable, and globally accessible resource or becomes fragmented at the technical level. That is why events such as this one are important to create awareness and demystify these topics so that interested entities may get involved in the process. So, on this topic, on WSIS+20, we believe it has the potential to modernize the language around multi-stakeholder model to reflect today's evolving digital landscape. There is a potential to have even more clearly defined the role of technical community in the global internet governance discussion. And of course, as some of the speakers have said, to extend and enhance the IGF. So please allow me to briefly elaborate as to why these points are particularly important, including to the communities in India. The multi-stakeholder model, as said by many of our speakers, is essential because it ensures that governments, the private sector, the civil society, academia, and the technical community collaborate to shape the policies that guide the internet. This inclusive and transparent approach, which has been embraced by organizations like ICANN, ITF, ISOC, and others, has been instrumental in maintaining the internet as a global and accessible resource. The diverse participation that the multi-stakeholder model facilitates allows for views and unique needs of developing markets to be heard, including a market like India. WSIS+20 is an opportunity to formally acknowledge and strengthen these contributions. Secondly, technical expertise is essential to the internet's stability, security, and growth. Therefore, excluding or marginalizing the technical community risks undermining the internet's operational integrity and scalability. And thirdly, as many of the speakers has mentioned, the Internet Governance Forum, or IGF as we affectionately call it, remains the only truly global, inclusive platform where all stakeholders, technical, governmental, businesses, and civil society can engage on equal footing. The IGF has the capacity to be leveraged to address pressing digital policy and governance challenges in a way that informs decision-making across regulatory, technical, and operational domains. As such, I can support efforts to move beyond temporary mandate extension and establish the IGF as a permanent, well-resourced venue for global internet governance discussion. As the WSIS+20 negotiation progress, ICANN urges interested internet community members to stay informed, engage in discussion, and advocate for the preservation of an open, secure, single, and interoperable internet. The internet community cannot afford to be passive observers. There remains an opportunity for the broader community, especially here in India, to amplify this message. Some of these ways can be done through engaging your national government to share factual information about the successes of the multi-stakeholder model and explain the internet's technical foundations. Information is a key to some of these discussions. Join existing networks, for instance, ICANN's WSIS+20 outreach network, to keep yourself informed about the latest development. There are a lot of discussion ongoing, and very often you can't follow this alone, but you're not alone. There are a lot of resources and a lot of experts who are following discussions and more than happy to share this information. And one of these platforms is the outreach networks where they share developments, they have discussions. It's good to hear from them. And of course, very important, events such as this. Spread the word. Help others understand the importance of internet governance and the role they can play in shaping its futures. And thank you again for the opportunity to share this view. Thank you.
Thank you, Angela. Thank you. If there are no other questions and we are 20 minutes over the hour, perhaps I would, if the speakers would want one last word or one last line to share, please feel free to, share your last words on it. This is the beginning of the conversation. We will have more such discussions and we'll come up with a report which we will also circulate. Does anyone have anything to share? Any of our esteemed speakers or anyone?
I just have a small, very short submission. I think that digital public infrastructures have been adequately underlined. Of course, they do mean different things to different people. But I think that India here, for its wonderful leadership in making sure that standards and protocols particularly stand the test of how marginalized people can use them, for instance, the UPI. This really remains, I think, at the top of what the world can imbibe. I would also like for the debates on public financing, especially in the light of the fact of the UN system that's changing, to be taken up by our esteemed government representatives, because there is a direct connection between public infrastructures and public finance. I think we shouldn't lose connection of that fact. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anita. Anyone else? Avinashji, Sunil, or Sushilji?
I wanted to compliment the Joint Secretary for the submission that they have already made or are making, especially around the use of DPIs for persons with disability. I think that is a wonderful thing. And then fully agree on a variety of other things that he said around multilingualism and the multi-stakeholder model. For Dr. Tyagi, I wanted to compliment him on the involvement of young people in NICSI. I met some of them at the Global Tech Summit, very inspiring young people. I think that's a long-term investment, sir, and I think you have traditionally also sent people to the global standards bodies. So, despite what Sushil Palji said about the fragmentation, fora, I think NICSI is well placed to continue to send both government officers and young people to all these global locations for internet governance, both on the technical standards and on other matters. So thanks to both of you, sir.
Thank you, Sunil. Avinashji, do you want to share some last words?
Nothing special, just wanted to thank. This was a very fruitful discussion, and once we get your report, we'll take it forward. Thank you.
Right. Thank you so much, sir. Sushilji, any last words? Any last words you want to share?
Thanks for the appreciation, and think we'll keep doing our duty in making our citizen or whatever country persons to participate at the global forums. And we are now also looking out not only the participation but to the contribution as well. We are trying to work with the policies and other, even in the technical forums. We would like to be contributing more in coming times. That is what our main goal is. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And thank you everyone for patiently being here for nearly 2 hours and going to be 2 hours. Thank you so much. You have really shared a lot of perspective. So our team, Shraddhanjali, Swati, would be trying to assess this and make a report and share with you. I hope you find it useful and we'll have more such discussions. And please do send us your views, good, bad, in case you want something to be added. Please let us know. Thank you so much, and we'll end the discussion here.